Hey, this is Rory Karpf,
And I'm Francesco.
and you're listening to the Cinematography Podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography Podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey there, Ben.
Hey Ilya, how's it hanging?
It's hanging like it's another episode of the Cinematography Podcast.
Well played.
How's it hanging
I
with
see
you?
that we are recording on St. Patrick's Day, and I see that you are not wearing green.
You know what? It's my tradition. I usually wear green the rest of the year, just not on St. Patrick's Day.
Granted, I'm only seeing you from from the chest up, so you could be wearing green
Oh,
costumes.
actually, it's funny. Yes, my pants are actually green plaid pajama bottoms. So there you go. So
Okay. Well, I don't have to hire a task rabbit to run to you in Portland and pinch you.
thanks.
That's good.
So Ben, who is on our show today?
Well, we have a director DP combo for the indie feature Grace Point, which is currently on VOD. It's streaming on, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Apple. Wherever you get your VOD stuff, you can definitely get it there. Rory Karpf, the director, and Francesco, the DP. And I think they have a super interesting story because, they are both extremely prolific, but mostly in the docu-follow style reality TV format, in which they've done a lot of sports stuff. They've done stuff with Snoop Dogg, but also sports related stuff. And they kind of have a unique story about getting a feature made. And even their docu-follow stuff leads into how they got this movie made. And it's relatively low budget. I believe Rory said it was $500,000 during the interview. And I have to give a shout out to my friend Alok Mishra, who's a producer friend of mine, and he is one of the producers on this film, and he brought it to my attention. And I think it's a really solid it's a solid little indie thriller, and it stars Rob Lowe's son and co-stars as Rob Lowe's son's father, Andrew McCarthy. So big Gen X thing going on there.
Wow. All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, and it looks really great, and I think Al did a phenomenal job. And they talk extensively about their process and how their process is kind of fed by their docu-follow style. I think it's a really interesting story.
Wow. Interesting. Got it. Wow. I look forward to hearing it in a little bit.
And now, close focus.
So, Ben, what is going on in the news? What do we have to talk about for our close focus today?
It's like a close focus that's aimed kind of right at us. It's Panavision Hollywood is closing.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean Panavision is closing.
No, Panavision has offices worldwide, and they had two in Los Angeles, but that means half of their offices in LA are now closed or about to close. I mean,
Yeah.
April 11th, I think, is the last day for
How
Panavision
long
Hollywood.
has Panavision been in Hollywood?
God, it's been a long time. Certainly longer than I've been in Los Angeles. So it's
It would be
you know,
back to
over.
maybe the origins of Panavision itself.
Yeah, I'm not actually exactly sure about when, but the Panavision Hollywood office has always been more like a satellite office because the Woodland Hills location is their worldwide headquarters. That's so the satellite office though is pretty major as far as a rental house goes. It was easily on par with any other major rental house in Los Angeles, and they serviced a lot of. I mean, I prepped out of there. I can't tell you how many times over the years, but and I went there for several other things back in the early days of our PL mounts, and we built some custom Panavision mounts for people through Hot Rod Cameras, and so Hollywood was way more convenient because Hot Rod Cameras was in Hollywood. It was right down the street, so I had a really good relationship with a lot of the team over there. And it sounds like a lot of people are losing their jobs. Some of them are getting new positions over in Woodland Hills, but a lot of people are going to be out of work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was my
And
question: is like whose commute just got a little bit longer, and is is this more indicative of expensive Hollywood real estate and rents going up, or is this more indicative of doldrums in the industry and, like we talked about last week, Technicolor shutting down major operations?
Oh, actually, I just looked it up here. Panavision is celebrating its 70th anniversary. So yeah, they've been around for a minute. Well, it doesn't say that Hollywood, but it does say 70 years. And they still have offices in more than a dozen countries, including the UK, Australia, Canada, France, and South Africa. So, and really, though, it's indicative of the times. It's the industry has hit a rough patch the last 2 years. Very difficult for companies to weather the storm. A lot of companies are depressed right now. Panavision Hollywood is not the only rental house to go under. There is another one that actually they're having a liquidation auction in about a week, or maybe this week, called Industry Camera. Industry Camera is in Burbank. It was run by a guy named Mark Ritchie. Really, really nice guy. I've known him for a long time. So yeah, he's entering. I saw his LinkedIn post that he's entering a new phase of life, chapter of life, and so this is going away. I have talked to several other rental houses in town, and they're telling me similar things in that a lot of typical clients are not renting right now. A lot of like sort of bread and butter people. And it's very, very constricted. So purchasing is way down, which of course affects my company because we sell to rental houses. Rental houses are a big part of our bread and butter. Thankfully, we have other customers too. But yes, if we were 100% reliant on the rental industry, we'd be in a lot of trouble because that is really, really hurt right now, especially in LA.
I remember when you started Hot Rod asking if you were going to do rentals, and you said no. And
no, and look, I'm not doing rentals because of the timing right now, but I had come from doing rentals. I have a lot of contacts and know a lot of people in that space, and it is a tough business even when times are good. So the fact that it's been really pretty slow the last couple of years, really since mid 2023, it tells you everything you need to know about the industry. Will it get better? Yes, it absolutely will. Is it going to be back to the heights it was in 2021, 2022? Probably not. But I do anticipate it will get better. There's a lot of money being invested in new studio space, not in Los Angeles, but new studio space happening. And the studios are the people behind that. Netflix is putting $900 million into New Jersey. There's a massive project happening in Las Vegas, one of a couple projects in Las Vegas. So I expect that there is going to be a lot more production in the future. Where that's going to take place, though, will it be decentralized? Probably. Will it return to Los Angeles? Inevitably, yes, because there's more ability to get it done. But, look, there's been a lot of people talking about this lately, including a friend of the show, Michael Cioni, did a HPA talk. I agree with about probably 50-75% of everything that Michael Cioni goes through in that his HPA talk. But I also feel sort of compelled, because I've been asked about it several times recently, is it all doom and gloom? Is this 100% the way it is? And the answer is no. I've known to prognosticate a bit about the industry, and I tend to have a pretty good record on that. And while I know that things are going to be tough, we had a really, really terrible strike, then another strike, then a threat of a strike. And every time there is a strike,
right after COVID.
Right after COVID. But every time there is a strike, there's a period of time before things get back to normal. So there's been people talking about, I've talked to an executive in the industry the other day who was saying this is punishment. The studios are punishing Los Angeles for these strikes. They're punishing.
To that, I say to the studios, eat a dick, because honestly, like, if you're telling me the cost drivers on film are actors and writers, you're way off base. I mean, like that's not what's cost. That's not what's.
No, I think it's more than that. I think it's vindictive. I think it's that, like, really, it's only going to be about 2.5 years before the negotiations for the next round start up again. And I think that the idea is to take away the strike as a threat. So, because it's going to be like, oh, you threaten strike against us, we can move our production to South Korea. We can move our production to all these other places and the UK where we don't have to worry about this. And, who does the strike hurt? The strike ends up hurting predominantly writers, actors, and IATSE. That's who's
IATSE is the largest group
IATSE
of people.
The biggest
IATSE and Teamsters are going to be the largest group of people. And, you know, I mean, I don't know if they do that, like, good luck finding directors. I mean, like, good luck finding all the crew that you need to do this stuff well. I think that, for,
Well, they're doing it. They're going other places to try to find it. So
yeah, it's just, they're going to end up throwing other money at it to make it work, because they're not going to find the crew base that they need that's as seasoned as the crew base here. And, you know, like, look, people in the entertainment industry are used to traveling all over the place for work and, you know, driving across the country and all that. Like, that's normal. So it doesn't have to happen here, but a lot of time the gear is coming out of LA.
That's definitely not a limiting factor anymore. There are rental houses all over the world, all over the country. But I think that what keeps production here predominantly are the number one, number two people on the call sheet saying, I want to shoot in Los Angeles. Because you can shoot Los Angeles for just about anywhere and everywhere.
That's why LA became the center of filmmaking, is because
it requires, you know, the cast to say, this is what I want to do. And if they're not doing that, then it makes it a lot harder.
All right. Well, RIP Panavision Hollywood, but I'm glad Panavision itself is still going strong. And I look forward to the end of this contraction. And I do hope that the studios are not just being a bunch of vindictive dorks.
I think that's definitely a portion of it. It's probably not, you know, look, it's a particular recipe.
They'll be shooting themselves in the feet, though, because it's like, you know, they want product to make money. And
yeah, I think that they're going to be realizing really quickly that they cannot satisfy their needs with just the stuff that they've been acquiring, and the business models really are the things that need refining. So.
All right. Well, you want to get to, speaking of refining business models, let's see one that really worked well. Are you ready to go to the interview about Grace Point?
Let's do it.
Here we go.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. Really cool film. Like, so I kind of want to start. So we're going to talk about the cinematography of it, but I kind of want to start with the germ of the idea. So Rory, like, where did it initially come from?
Well, originally, so I did a film called The Book of Manning. It was a documentary about the Manning family, and Al was the DP on that as well. And from that documentary, I was able to get a manager in Hollywood. And he had asked me, what are you wanting to do? Like, what are some of your goals? And I said, I really want to do a scripted film. Well, he had a script from one of his clients, and it was called Mercy Falls. And it was kind of the bones of Grace Point. It was written by this guy, Paul Russell Smith. But it was much bigger film. Like a lot of big things were going on. Probably like a $20 million movie.
Oh wow!
And like a lot of things in Hollywood, it just kind of gestated for a while, and then eventually, you know, people were attached, but then it just went away. And then around COVID, I was doing a shoot with Al in this town of Laurinburg, North Carolina, and we both had the same exact thought at the same time, because we had driven down the same road to get to the location in different cars. And Al was like, man, this would be a great place to shoot a scripted movie. There's just so much character in this area. I said, yeah, definitely. And he's like, you know what you should do is you should take that script, Mercy Falls, and rewrite it so it all takes place in this town, and we could get all the stuff around here for free. And that turned out to be a brilliant idea. He gets one in a lifetime. So Al, he pretty much inspired me to go home, and I kind of just rewrote that script based on the town and the locations we could get and what we could get for free and whatnot, and just kind of backtrack from that. So that script came together in like 10 days.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then Al and I had a shoot in Abu Dhabi for the UFC, and I showed it to him on the airplane. And then the entire time we were in Abu Dhabi, we kept talking about the movie, and we're just discussing it. And that was in January of 2021, and we were shooting June 2021. That's how quickly it came together. Yeah, after that.
But I think a lot of people look at the film and they say, wow, that was, I think that's one of the secrets of it in a way, is that it was a really good script to start, but then he backed it up and made it work with what we had. And I think that's all of small budget filmmaking to me, is, using what you have and being able to make it look like, it was on purpose, but he wrote it that way. So it's like, okay, that helps so much, when you have that, as opposed to trying to create something that's not there. We could, in essence, create or use what was already there and make that even better. So I don't know. I think that is one of the little secrets of the film, to be honest.
Yeah.
Of why.
What's cool about what you're telling me, though, is like, I don't know that I've ever heard the story of like a DP basically inspiring the whole film. Like, here's the script that you guys had, and the DP remembering it and saying, wow, that would really work here at this location that we're shooting.
It was going to be a hard film to shoot the other way it was written. It was like in the winter and these really crazy woods and settings, and the script always had that kind of a little weirdness to it, kind of interesting. Like, you're not sure. It should be kind of, it just was a little off. So when we were driving through there, it really fit that theme of it, I think. Don't you think, Rory? That's where we both were like, man, this is the place, it just rework it a bit.
That's the mistake a lot of writers make that I've met. They make great scripts, but you're what does a screenplay mean if it's not made into a movie? That's what I always say. It's not like a novel or a book where very few people have a favorite screenplay that's never been made into a movie. They just disappear. They're just words on your computer if it's not made into a movie. So, I mean, I know a lot of great writers who have made great screenplays, but they haven't been made into a movie. So I think when you're writing, you want to try to write something that you can make. And that's where I've shifted my focus into, how will we make this on a budget? And it's way easier to get $500,000 or $1 million than $20 million or $30 million, especially as an indie. If you're trying to make an independent film and you're trying to raise $5 million or you're trying to raise $500,000, what's better? So I think as a filmmaker or even a creator, I try to look at first, like, what do I have? And Al and I do this on our documentary projects too. Like, what do we have here? And then what can we make based off of that the best way, versus trying to kind of force a square, what is this, the cliche, a square peg into a circle or something. And that's what happens a lot of times. Like, somebody gets it in their mind, I want to do this and I want to do it this way. And yeah, you can do that if you're Christopher Nolan, but if you don't have those resources, sometimes it's like, well, what do we have and what's the best possible thing we could make with what we have?
So outside of like the location, like what resources did you guys have, because it just sounds like, pre-production happened, not in a blink, but like it came together as a film. Like it could take, it often takes 10 years for a movie to come together, and you guys got it together in 6 months?
Yeah. The number one superpower we had were relationships. Al and I started together. I think he was maybe a year before me. We started at the NFL together, at NFL Films. Al was an intern, and I was like the lowest level producer. So like our careers have always kind of just been simpatico, and then we went to NASCAR together, and we've always just like worked on things together. And I would say it's almost more like a partnership than I would look at it like a DP over here and director over there. And then through the years of working on all these docs together, we've just made relationships with a production designer or audio or our producer, and they all just worked on much lower rates or scale, or sometimes
we
free.
had gear too. We had gear. We had access to gear, so, we didn't have to, it's not like we were starting with, nothing. So I think that helped a lot. And like you said, we knew enough people that we could get it in the thing. And I think also we do a lot of small batch filmmaking as it is, because we take these documentaries and try to do little movie scenes. So we were familiar with that process anyway. So, but I really like, it's not a bad negative for us to have a small crew and try to make the most out of it. That's normally what we're doing. So I think like that's why we were always talking about. It's like, well, we could do it. It's just it's just 3 of these little projects we've been doing, putting them on top of each other and doing them back to back, you know? Yeah.
That's a really good point. Like in our documentaries that we do, we have a very small crew. And the reason why I like a small crew is when you're trying to form trust with your subject, it's way easier if you come in with like 4 people than if you come in like a commercial shoot with like 50 people and everyone's on walkies and everyone has their own job. It just becomes this whole like thing. And it's much more difficult to make your subject and who you're filming comfortable. So we already liked sort of a guerrilla filmmaking style. And Al and I were doing a documentary for AMC. It was called The Trials of Superman. And what it was is they had it was about the creators of Superman and how...
In Vancouver, right?
In Vancouver. So it was all recreations and then interviews with historians because they didn't have any footage of this stuff. So Al and I did these recreations. It was shot over like 10 days or something. And it was with Al and I were the only ones that knew each other. Everyone else was the crew of the Flash CW TV series.
Oh, wow.
And what they liked was just how efficient we were. Like we went in, we knew what we wanted. We didn't waste time. And it just kind of like both of us would have dinner every night afterwards. And we were just like, yeah, like we kind of almost like in a reassuring way, like, hey, we know what we're doing. Like we can do this. We can make a movie because all these people worked on a TV series and they're like, yeah, you guys are great to work with. We always got out on time. So that was helpful too. And then just going back to the relationship.
How many days did we go over 10 hours on the Grace Point?
We never went over on Grace Point. In fact, we lost a day filming. We did the whole movie in 19 days.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. That's amazing because there's so much action in so many like spread out locations.
Yeah.
Or at least, I mean, that's what it looks like to me. I don't know. For all I know, everything is next to
there's
it.
a few secrets in there for ones that are pretty close together but don't seem. But yeah, no, I mean, I think I think part of the secret to making something that I feel like that at the end looks, you know, like you spent a lot more money than you had is that kind of a thing. Can you be efficient with time, you know, location, and also, you know, I think at least at the end of the movie, we were really proud to say, hey, look, we never 20-hour day and had to do all, you know, like we got the job, you know, we did it, I think within 30 minutes of a 10-hour day every day.
Well, you also have a movie that's like mostly exteriors. And so
it was brutal in the summer.
It's impossible to go over 10 hours because, you know.
Well, we got a little blessed, honestly, with the weather. We did have the better case scenario. But
you're shooting a script that I imagine doesn't have that many cover sets. So, you know,
0. Yeah, I mean, we really didn't have much to do. We probably switched it around a little bit for weather 1 or 2 times. But one of the you know, the chase sequences with the airplanes and this crazy thing. There's a really cool secret thunder clap in that one that I really love. We probably had 3 times as many shots planned that day and all these other ideas for this Michael Bay style chase scene. And we got to do maybe a third of it, but the rain was coming in. And it's one of the cool parts of the movie where they're about to kiss through the fence and you hear a thunder clap, you know, but that's actually natural sound design. It's not even.
I thought that was.
Yeah, it's really cool. But it's like one of those things where like I watch it and I you know I know that, but anyway, that's a good example of that day. That may have been a half day that we did all that stuff in, and we had you know all this. You know, we had way more stuff to do, but we just had to do with what we had that day. But yeah, it was a rough when you looked at those location lists. There were, you know, and the other thing with, you know, when you're not paying a lot of money or no money for some of these locations, it's not like we could go there a day or 2 early. So a lot of this stuff was very tight with we got to get something today to make this work because we don't have this tomorrow. We're already moving on. It's, you know, so there's a lot of those kind of stories too, I think. But they're fun to think back on. I was looking through some of my notes. You know, I think one of the things that's really important on something like this is like I knew that script as well, just about as well as Rory did. You know, like we could talk about it on a word by word basis. So I knew as we had to flex everything. Like, well, here's what we need from this. You know, and I knew it front and back. So I did extensive research on just what I wanted to do and what could we do. And it was fun looking the other day when they're like, oh, we're going to do a podcast. I'm like, oh, I better look back at my notes and see if there's anything in here. So that was kind of fun. It is fun. I would say there's a good couple things in there that we got that I wanted, like, hey, here's my reference and that's pretty close, So that's pretty good saying on the, there's definitely things we could have done a lot better, but there are a few
19-day
things.
shoot though, man. On a 19-day shoot that's mostly exteriors shot in the South.
Yeah.
I'm from Florida and worked on a number of films in Florida,
Right.
Georgia, Alabama,
Same.
New Orleans, and it's like you're always dancing around weather. Like weather is going to screw you up, and the fact that you got it in 19 days is incredible to me. I mean, like that's heroic.
We prepped a lot though, and that I think is the key. We did 3 scouts like at 3 different times. The first time is when we picked out the locations, and then we did a full tech scout. And then Al and I were there like almost 2 weeks before we started shooting. And he and I, which was really, really helpful to me, is we would just go through like the shots with nobody there. And then we would prioritize them. Like, we're going to start with this one. And he would have a reason like, no, let's start with this one. And I would say, let's do like wide coverage first, just so the actors can get warmed up or something. And we talk everything out. And we talked everything out throughout all of pre-production. We probably hours every day we talked about stuff. And that really helps that on the day that you go in with a plan and we have it prioritized. And we also knew like we had to be out at this time. So we just knew what we wanted. I discussed it with the actors of like, this is what we're going to do. So I think when you're prepped well, then you can kind of deviate from that plan sometimes. And then you have some room for improvisation, especially if like, okay, well, we got these 6 shots we really wanted, and we have another 30 minutes. What do you want to try? Let's try this. Let's try that. So,
but it wasn't super rigid. Like, I think that's one thing that I was enjoyable to make it is we got some things, obviously we had all this prep, but also we deviated, I think, a good amount not by adding or sometimes subtracting, just, hey, now that we're here and the light's coming here and this is all happening, like, it's the same shot. Let's just do it more over here. Like, I like that. It's fun. That's why I like documentaries so much and things like that. Like, okay, some of it's just capturing stuff, some of it's being creative, creating these moods, but sometimes you're there and you're like, man, the light's beautiful. One example in Grace Point is that foggy scene, right? Remember that in the morning? Obviously you don't plan the fog, but I remember like probably one of the few times I'm starting to raise my voice. It's 5 or 6 a.m. and I'm like, dude, we have got to shoot before this fog goes. Like it wasn't, we didn't know it was going to be foggy, but it made that 1,000 times better.
Yeah,
we planned that shot on the
value.
day, the bike ride scene in there. Originally, I think he was just going to be walking through the grass with his bike, but we had him bike all the way in because it was just unexpected of how.
But again, that's a good example of, hey, we need to get into this scene. This is a way better way than it was going to be, or not even, So I think that part's fun. I mean, I really like that part of doing it. So like, I won't ever want to get like, don't try to over prep when, it has to be this way. There's some people that are like, no, this is the storyboard and here we go. And we're definitely a lot more loose than that, I think, in our process. But I like being able to have a little bit of both. You have what you have written down and that's going to work. And then you can just insert or substitute or add as needed,
Well, I wanted to, because, looking at both of your backgrounds, like you both primarily have done documentaries and a lot of them have been sports related, although you've also done all the Snoop Dogg stuff as well. But some of that is even Snoop Dogg sports related. I'm curious about like how documentary, where sometimes you're just capturing what's happening in the moment. Sometimes, like you said, you guys are shooting reenactments. So that's more like narrative filmmaking, really. But like how the documentary background informed how you wanted to do this, and also just kind of talk about your general collaboration, how you two guys break down a scene when you're going at it. If you're saying that you function more in kind of a creative partnership when you're working together like this.
Do you want to start with the documentary side?
Yeah. Because to me, that's like, so much of both of your background is doing documentary. And we've talked to people who've done documentary and narrative, people like Alan Kuras or whatever. And it's two different but very complementary muscles. I'm just wondering, like how one informs the other.
Al can talk about it maybe from a tech standpoint. For me, one thing I learned with documentaries are like, things are going to change. And, I'm out pitching things right now. And when you're pitching things to these streamers, they want everything laid out ahead of time on somebody you're going to follow for a year. And, you can put it all on paper, but the shit's going to definitely change. That's one thing, and you have to be what Bruce Lee said, like water. You have to fill the container. And if you go in with this rigid idea of this is the documentary I'm making versus going with the flow of how things move, that's the key. So I've gone in a lot of times like with an idea and it completely changes. And I try to be open to that. And based off of what somebody says in an interview or something that creates a spark. Well, with narrative scripted filmmaking, again, whether it could be weather or also it could be like the actor isn't just not getting the scene right for whatever reason and just try or figuring out a way to de-stress it, or maybe this is what it says in the script, but we're going to try something a little bit different, and being open to that working. And one thing that was really helpful, which Al can speak on in the editing, is Al was always filming. And always filming.
That's docu style, yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
I remember back when we were at like
actors don't really like that.
They don't. But he's always filming. It could be hands. It could be somebody just looking pensive. But when we were at NASCAR together, I remember somebody that was working with Al had stopped filming, and I was like, "Never stop filming because you're going to get the most natural reactions when someone thinks you're not." And there were times in the movie, whether it's Andrew McCarthy's reaction to something or Ed Barbanel, the actor with Down syndrome, a lot of times there's moments in the film where he's actually trying to remember his lines, but he's looking nervous. And Al was always shooting. And even he would shoot a little bit after I yelled cut. And I could see it on the monitor, but nobody else could really tell what was going on. So... and that really, really helps you in the editing room to have these little, sometimes an extra couple of seconds can make all the difference in the world.
Well, I think, from follow docs, if you're in especially one camera, right? If you're one camera and you're in somebody's house and they're in their kitchen doing something, you got to get the sound of what they're saying. And then, maybe while Rory's talking to him about what we're doing next or the next scene, or he's just asking him a question, if you're filming his hands, the cutaway, the insert, while that's happening, then you have that, as a operator. So, okay, now I've got the insert. So when he's actually talking and we have content together, I don't have to worry about that as a single camera type of thing. So, a lot of times, if an actor's rehearsing, well, their hands are still doing the right things, they're maybe, so it's like I would shoot stuff like that, or, and things like, and that's what he's saying, like filling in, because I'm always about getting coverage when you need little bits and pieces. That just more from, we do a lot of what, follow doc or whatever you want to call it. So, if you're with, a sports person and they're at home with their kids and you're there doing a scene, we do a lot of stuff where, you might throw up a few lights to try to make it look nicer too, and, do a things, but I mean, it's still kind of gathering it. So, you got to be able to move around and get angles and make a scene out of maybe 4 or 5 minutes of time spent with them, but you want to get a minute's worth of nicely. So I think that's where, we knew we could kind of take those things to Grace Point and make, use that kind of mentality. And so in that, early on, we were decided, like, we're just, especially for time and money purposes, but just as far as the story really lends itself to just following the one character through his journey.
Yeah.
And that's really what the whole film is. I mean, if you look at it, there are very few shots that aren't just very subjective with him we're like hanging out with them, you know? So I'm like, look, if we can take that thing that we kind of do with Follow Docs and make the movie like that. I mean, other movies are done like that, but this is really pretty focused, and we're just with Johnny the whole time. And or Brandon, I guess, in the movie. But like we follow him. We're on his hip, and we're doing so. A lot of it is right like that. So again, that's not something we don't do all the time. So that felt really good, like I said, and being able to just move around the set and get angles. I think that's what it's funny. The actors on the movie really liked how we're not spending a lot of time resetting. We're lighting, getting the scene set up, and then just filming as if it's happening a few times, and then we're done. And then they would go, wait, what else? No, that's it. We're good. 3 or 4 angles of this, we're done. We're moving on. So it's a really nice, efficient way, even on films, to do it, because it's not a lot of start and stopping. Obviously things happen. You have to adjust things, but it's really get it set up, let them do their thing. A lot of times filming, like I said, inserts maybe during rehearsals, even. Trying to frame out scripts and sodas in the background while there's just to get little cutaways. But then it's like, okay, last looks, whatever, get them going, and then just run it a few times and then move on. So I think
like in the follow doc world, I mean, do you, like, when you go into a location, if you're in somebody's house or whatever, are you generally kind of looking for one basic lighting setup that kind of covers all the angles you could possibly want? Like, that's kind of a brilliant thing, because I think it's kind of funny, because I feel like the follow doc aesthetic has become more cinematic over the last several years.
Yeah.
So it's kind of copying how movies do it, and take that.
Well, throw a good camera at it. Okay, throw a good lens at it, and then to me, 3/4 of it is, okay, let's do it this way because the light's already working with us. And then, maybe you're throwing a bounce into a ceiling or something like that. Or just, most of the time it's turning off all the lights, shutting a few blinds, and then turning on a few that you might want, and then go. A lot of times it's that simple.
Well, a lot of times you're in the woods, so
for this movie, is a little different. Yeah, I was really a little bit more. That was probably the most stressful part. Is like not having as much control in the woods, and we don't have. I mean, we had what was probably the equivalent of like a 3-ton.
Really?
So
okay. So let me ask.
Yeah,
you say it was a small crew. How small of a crew are you talking about? Because I know a follow doc crew is next to nothing.
No, it was definitely more than a follow doc. How many people at Rory were on the call sheet necessarily every day? I mean, if it was 35, something like that,
maybe 30 people, and this is something too that goes back to what Al and I have done previously. A lot of times we're working with celebrities or athletes, and we have very limited time with them. Mm-hmm. So I always go to, and I've seen where this goes wrong many times, especially when I was coming up, is directors or producers, they want to shoot everything instead of shooting the right thing. And that's a surefire way to piss people off because you're wasting their time. If you want to piss off a celebrity and burn a bridge immediately, take all the time you want, So one way I've been able to maintain relationships with the Mannings, like Peyton, and we just worked on another project, and also Snoop Dogg and Dana White and these people, is we go in there and we're very efficient, and we try to take the same approach to the narrative filmmaking. Like we're going to shoot the right things. We're not going to shoot everything. Now, look, in a perfect world, if we had Nosferatu money, if we knew we could go back to the locations, sure, I would love to be able to do that. I'd love to be able to take a week on one scene. Why not? Because then you go in the edit room and you're guaranteed to have everything. You have 100 choices. But man, when you're making an indie and you've got $500,000, you don't have that luxury. You got to make tough choices. And that's what Al and I have had to do in our documentary work, especially with celebrities.
There's a few scenes in the movie, I would say, that has a couple takes, like more, one hand's worth, and so on a setup, say on an angle. So, 1 or 2 times here, let's flip around, let's get it, let's move on. So there's not, I'm sure they would have liked to have more, but there are some scenes that we shot really, really, really tight just for the sake of making the day. And like I said, trying not to go over to that 20 hours or, we really tried to work hard to make it really efficient. And I think, everybody worked really hard when we were working because of that. I think we had, so I think that's really some of the secret sauce of it. And I really try to remember those times because it does help, with the crew and everybody else, if you're not trying, we're being very efficient and it's leading to good stuff on the screen.
We also, Al says stuff and it reminds me of something like, I used to watch all these videos on YouTube before we were doing this, like on Film Courage or like a podcast like yours, and just try to glean as much stuff as possible. And I remember like, Clint Eastwood does 2 takes.
Yeah.
Like, why can't I do?
If that, I mean, like, there's that continuum of like David Fincher with 50 takes and Clint Eastwood with 1 to 2 takes. And like, they're both great. You can't really say one is right and one is wrong.
Of course. And what Clint Eastwood said is, he hires people and then lets them do their work because that's how he liked to be treated as an actor. So I kind of did the same thing. I'm not a micromanager. I want to hire good people and then let them do their thing and give them some guidance or help them to get the best achievable result for their talents and ability. So there was one scene in the film, one of my favorite scenes is when Cutter is looking out at the lake and Brandon comes and sits next to him. And Jim Parrick, the actor in that scene, who's an incredible actor.
He's so good. Yeah, he's really great in that movie.
He was just cast in Steven Spielberg's new movie, so he's gone from me to Spielberg. He
take full credit.
We did 2 takes of that scene. 2 takes. We did it because we were shooting with a prime lens. So we did 1 take where Johnny and Jim, like you see Johnny in the background, it's more of a 2 shot. He's kind of out of focus. And then we did like Jim's hero close-up where you could see the tear coming out of his cheek and whatnot. So, and Jim was saying to me, he was like, look, on this first take, I'm not going to be able to get probably the emotion you're looking for again after that. Meaning like being able to cry. He's not somebody that can just cry on cue. He's got to feel it.
Yeah.
And he was saying, so make sure with this tear, you get it on take 1. Well, we're already set up for the wide and and this is the shot Albie really wants because Al is saying, oh, this is going to look so good because you're going to see Johnny's going to sit into the frame. And we rehearsed this once. When we went to do the scout, we had like Al's son and me sit in the frame and it did look awesome. So we did that first. And of course, Jim Parrick, he has the single tear. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get him to do this again. How am I going to do it?
Chop onions right in front of his face.
On an independent film, and I try to give this advice on people who are making short films and everything. Man, like you better be appreciative of the people that are working on your movie. And it should really, it's a cliche, but you should feel like a family. More like they should feel like your friends, because some people hate their family. But you should feel like, that you guys are like a team, like a sports team almost. And so I went up to Parrick and I said to him, hey man, he said, you got that one? And he gave me a fist bump pretty good, right? And I go, yeah. I go, look, man, I got to tell you the truth. I think I fucked something up on that. And I don't know what I said to him. I think I said I bumped Al's arm or I said it's on me. And I said, I'm really embarrassed. But I said, dude, you were so good. Is there any way you could do this again? And he kind of just felt like sympathy for me, like I was pathetic or something. So he was like, yeah, man, just give me 5 minutes. So he took his 5 minutes and then he did it better. He had a double tear. So
the sun was going down too, by the way. Right?
Yeah,
we were trying to shoot a magic hour shot by the lake,
but we got
magic hour with actor crying on cue. That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot to put together.
It worked though.
They actually swam in the lake too, which I can't believe they did. That was a real lake with like
alligators and stuff.
I don't know, this swamp yeah, I don't know, some kind of swamp creatures in that thing.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm not going in that water. We did have like a little pontoon boat, to get some coverage or whatever. I was like, It was a rough one.
What was the process to kind of come up with these like very specific locations that would have emotional resonance too, like the lake?
That's all our producer, Rob Harvell. Rob Harvell grew up in this town, and he's somebody I've worked with for like 20 years. And we filmed in this town of Laurinburg like 15 different times. And because it's an area that kind of time has forgotten in parts. There's a Starbucks there, believe it or not. There's an Applebee's, but then there's whole streets of like abandoned buildings that haven't been torn down yet or rebuilt. So it's kind of like small town America, where there's some modern aspects, but there's a lot that's gone. And because Rob grew up there, they'll do anything for him. And we have filmed there many times because you could do it for recreations and make them look period, 1980s or 70s or 90s. We filmed all kinds of things there. If you go through my filmography on IMDb, I could point out all the times we shot stuff in Laurinburg. And a big part of that is the cooperation you get that maybe you wouldn't get in LA. It's nothing special for a movie to shoot in LA or New York. They're like, go fill out your permits, pay us these fees. You've got an hour. Whereas in Laurinburg, it is a big deal that we're filming there. They appreciate that we're just in the town, using their hotels, eating at the restaurant or restaurants. There's like two of them. So we knew the area really well. And what Rob did, I asked Rob after I sort of had this epiphany with Al, I said, can you take pictures of every cool location you can get? And we just called it a cool location. So there's one area there, and I don't know what you would officially call it. But there's like 7 of our locations are in this one almost like little park. We did the underground mine scene where they're like lighting a fire.
It's a museum, an old house museum, and they have in the back there's just some property. And so there's actually 5 or 6 different little areas to it. You know, there's a back woods that look different from the front woods and the more open woods, and then the side trails. And we made big use of that, like you're saying, because
and everything's close by.
Yeah, there's a little train. You know, like you could go there. I don't think it's even open anymore. You could go and drive a little train around. You know, like a little miniature one, like at an amusement park. And it went through a covered bridge. And that's what we used for our mine tunnel because it looked like a mine tunnel. When you're on the inside, if you blacked out one end, you couldn't, you were heading into the mine. So, things like that were actually worked out really well. We didn't have a location for the mine, I think, going into it, maybe. I don't think. I think that was...
Cobb sent pictures of everything, and I wrote it into the script. Okay. Even the lake, he said he could get the lake because that lake is backed up on someone's private property, and he could get us that property. So even when they're traversing up hills, it's on someone's private property. When Johnny's running through the woods, that's the backyard of a house of someone he knows. So we were doing that a lot through people. These weren't just like abandoned woods; they're like wooded areas on people's property that we used a lot of times.
Would it be hard to permit and shoot in the woods there, or even just to grab shots in the woods? Like in a town like that, would they have stopped you?
Yeah, well, there's one instance where someone came out and pulled a gun on us. A local. He thought that we weren't supposed to be, I don't know what he thought. I think he was like intoxicated or something. He sees obviously a whole camera crew there. But boom, right there, we had to say, no, we're supposed to be here. The police department knew we were there, the fire department, everyone in this little town. Did we have permits in quotes? No, but everyone knew where we were supposed to be.
They're not going to have necessarily a permitting office in a small place like that, so...
Well, but to answer your question, I think the answer is we knew that area pretty well. So to get the different looks and to make it feel like different places, even though they were close together, we knew enough about that area from being in it, and doing the multiple scouts that, we could make use of all those different areas. And I think that's, again, part of the, like we were saying, the secret sauce of it is using what you have and making it work within the thing. We could easily pivot that to say, okay, no, we need, and also, being outside, was again really challenging with a small crew, and we're not really changing a lot. We're modifying it, right? We're adding a little bit. You're not going to make, You're not going to make huge changes with a small crew and not a lot of time. So having some of those places had 3 trails. So one's facing this way, one's facing this way. So, okay, it's early afternoon. We got to shoot this one, because we had the lights where we wanted, and we throw up a little bounce and we're done, or something like that. So, being a little flexible, the nice thing about filming in the woods, I would say, is that, woods, yeah, they're kind of similar, but little variations. But if we need to face this way, that's great because of the light. It doesn't make that much difference from, we're not trying to have a big building in the background where we have to film in a certain direction. So being in the woods is like, wow, this is really nice. There's one really great scene with Johnny and Sophie as they come. He sees her after the first time of seeing her at the gas station and in these woods. And it was just a beautiful morning with the right light facing this old tree stump. We had that area pegged for what we were doing, but when we got there, it was even better than when we scouted because the light was just coming in at the perfect angle, So you kind of get a little lucky with that, but we had the option to kind of be in those woods and seeing different areas. So I think that's, again, it's important. So then all we needed now was a way for her to walk in and we could kind of make that little trail. So those are the kind of things, the woods do help.
We got a whole prison because Rob said, I think I can get us this. It was an abandoned, it was a real prison, but it was abandoned. And, we probably got black lung from being in there. It was so disgusting. We had to have a cleaning crew go out there like a week ahead and just make it filmable. But just stuff like that, and having the producer.
Well, I think the script called for like a bad guy camp or whatever, right? I mean, that could be a lot of things, but having the availability to that in this little small town, I mean, it looks like $1 million location,
Yeah,
it really
lookout
is.
towers and stuff, yeah.
It really, and fit the part, and like kind of like crop sharing, like people could go there and help grow stuff. So there's chickens in the back, and there was a donkey there and stuff in the back things. We didn't shoot a lot of that, but that whole idea of this little compound where these bad guys would be, setting up camp and kind of working out of, it was 100%, perfect.
Forgive my ignorance here, but because I was given a screener, but when does the movie come out? Where can people see it?
Movie's out. It's on Amazon and Apple right now. We had a small theatrical run, but yeah, best place is
It was in Santa Barbara Film Festival.
Yeah,
it's
a
great festival.
It is a great festival.
Yeah, that was really fun. That was really fun to go to.
Amazon and Apple, though, to answer your question. Those are the 2 places. And Grace Point Film is our Instagram and also our website.
Well, even the fact that you're able to keep going in reality, because reality TV is kind of in doldrums right now as well. The fact that you're able to...
Everything's in the doldrums. You just got to keep going forward. Filmmaking or any creative endeavor will break your heart. I tell people that, but I compare it to like romantic love. It's like if you were talking to a little kid and say, like, hey, man, do you want to fall in love someday? Like, yeah, well, you're going to have these other relationships that aren't going to work. And along the way, you're going to face rejection. Somebody's not going to be interested. They're going to tell you you're not good enough. But if you can find that special person, just like if you can find that special project, it is worth it in the end. So... And I know that there's a lot of aspiring filmmakers that listen to your podcast and also cinematographers. And I just think Al and I are a good example. We keep saying, man, we got to we're not youngsters anymore. We used to be the young guys on the shoots. Now we're the old guys on
the that feeling. I remember being on a shoot and looking around and being like, when did I become the old person on the set?
I'm telling Al all the time, I'm like, man, you gotta like start exercising and eating better because I need you to still be able to operate a camera when you're in your 60s. I can't have you, I'm trying to push him through some workout regimens, which he resists, but...
I like to rest. When I'm not carrying a camera around, I like to rest.
Well, but like to your point about the creative part, I think that's what's so great about, it's fun to make movies and like being creative. It's really cool. And even when we do these other shows, I'm always trying to be like, let's make this more like a movie, take that approach to documentaries. And that's why we wanted to do a full, end to end, movie as opposed to, bits and pieces of inside this documentary. It was really fun to see it end to end. But I mean, I'm the same way. It's like you want to be on that next project and have something to think about, have something to research, have something to kind of figure out the little bits and pieces of it. I mean, to me, that's the coolest part, whether we're doing documentaries or film or whatever, is like, okay, this scene is this, and we need to show this. In our documentary we did this scene where this guy's out shoveling snow in the middle of the night, uncovering this logo on the field. It was really important to him. So it's like, okay, that's cool. Let's make a scene out of that. How do we, we get the guy and he's putting on his jacket, and like, okay, how do we set up this thing and tell this emotional story through images, because a lot of that stuff, there's no dialogue. So it's like, okay, it's just fancy B-roll that tells the story. What's more fun than that? That's the best part. Yeah.
Another thing too, I'll say that we try to have, which I think is very important, is we try to have fun and have a good time, because making movies should be fun. I mean, I was on a panel once of like documentary filmmakers or something. I mean, you would think that these people like worked in Rwanda. I mean, the way they're describing what they're doing, and it's like, look, as a kid, it's what I used to do with my little He-Man action figures. Like, tell stories. You're telling stories. It's a privilege. It's a privilege. That's the way I look at it. And it should be enjoyable. If I wanted a job, I'd go work in insurance. I've had real jobs. And this to me is a career. And so, look, it doesn't mean it's not going to be hard work, or there's not going to be personality conflict sometimes when you're doing something that's creative. But ultimately, it should, I think, be an enjoyable experience. And what I'm happy with is 2 couples met on Grace Point that are married now. Oh, so, wow. Yeah, they didn't know each other. And some of the actors like Jim Parrick or Sean Carrigan said it was the best experience they've had filming anything. And these are people that have been on major TV shows, major movies. Sean Carrigan was Ford versus Ferrari. Jim Parrick was on True Blood on HBO. And they said this is one of the best experiences they ever had. So I think trying to foster that is really important to me as the director.
So now I need to ask, how do you foster that? How do you create it? Because I agree with you. We talk to a lot of people on here, and they're people working at the top of the field, and they take their work very seriously. And some people make it sound like hard, grueling work, which it can be. You could be on your feet for 14 hours doing this stuff. And, then we'll have, like Ben Kraken or Seamus McGarvey on here, and just hearing them talk about what they did makes it sound like the most fun job. How do you make it fun for both you? Because like all the pressure's on you two guys to make your day. How do you guys make it fun for you, and how do you foster kind of that vibe of fun on your set?
Well, there's a saying that the fruit rots from the top down. So I think as the director, and we've all had bosses where you could have a job at McDonald's, but if like your boss is cool, it makes the whole experience feel better. Like you can kind of drudge your way through it. Or you could have a great job, but if your boss is a dick, you don't like being around him. So I try to be cool to people, number one. Number two, I think we try to work with a sense of joy. And I don't know if Al would describe himself as joyful, but I think like we have a good sense of humor about things. And like he and I sometimes will like bump fists, or we'll just give each other a look. Like we get excited about making stuff. And Al even gets excited when we're shooting interviews, when the content of the interview is good, not just the way it looks. Like the content is good. That's why I like Al so much. I've been around other DPs, and all they care about is how the stuff looks, not how does it supplement the actual storytelling, which I think is the most important thing. And Al does both. He makes the stuff look great, but he also understands how it incorporates in the story. So he and I working together, I think that camaraderie and friendship that we have, and that joy, other people get it. It vibes out to them. We had kind of a curmudgeon-y guy on the set of Grace Point, but he was like the lone curmudgeon, and even he eventually came around. It's like everybody was having.
It's important to hire good people, and people that you like, though, too. I think that is. You know what I mean? You have to make, and having relationships working, not necessarily in, like I said, 100% narrative stuff, but doing bits of narrative and documentaries and stuff. If you have a decent crew, I mean, I think that's everything to the product. I mean, it really lends itself to the product. Rory, you got that quote from somebody. It was like, sometimes the best stuff comes from the hardest situations. That's probably true. Struggle. We had to really work for this. But also, you can do it. It doesn't have to be that way. I think we've shown that. I think, like you said, we worked with other crews in a lot of different places all around the country and even parts of the world. And people, oh, that was a great day. We still got good stuff. So it doesn't have to be a struggle and work and somebody yelling and screaming to get good stuff. I don't think. I think if you have good people that want to do good work with you, if somebody's there for the 9 to 5, I know that happens, but those people, they're not good. They're not going to help with that. So, having the right people and then treating people how you want to be treated. I think that's key. I don't like to be yelled at. So I try not to yell. Like, yeah, when those times happen, when things are getting a little freaked out, like, let's not start burning down the buildings. Let's figure out a way to make this work and get through our day and get what we need. And I think, like, that's where it helps. I would say if you're trying to work with, trying to do a short film on a low budget, as many people as you can get around you that are kind of that same way, and all working towards that project and really want to be there, then, that's a big part of it. So part of the success of this film, though, I think you can't say that it's the special group of people that you put together make all the difference, to make it happen.
Your friends, you're gonna want to hire people you want to work with. At least I want to.
No, you gotta spend all day every day with 30 of these people. You might
in the back of a car being smelly, trying to film something at the last minute after you've been working all day. Yeah, you don't want to be around. But I think that's where I think it's not a certain person that we need to have on a crew. I think it's like people, you know what I mean? If we're all working towards the same goal, then it doesn't matter who that person is. It's just they're all on the team. So I think that's really fun when I call it, like, because people always about the small batch whiskey. I call it small batch filmmaking. If you can do a little project, a small medium with a nice small group of people, then everybody's making that. Everybody's making that whiskey. Everybody's putting together the barrels or whatever it is. Like, we're all on that same group. So I think that filters through.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you guys both for coming on. Before we go, where can people find you both online? Let's start with you, Rory.
I'm not really online. The best place is Grace Point Film. My whole life is Grace Point. I don't know if you figured that out, Ben. I live and breathe Grace Point. I now work in Grace Point. So Grace Point Film, check it out. It's on Instagram, all socials.
And how about you, Al?
Yeah, I have a very average website, albifilms.net. Just has recent work, resume type of a website. But there's all kind of contact information.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys both for coming on, and hope a lot of the people listening to this check out Grace Point, which, as you said, is on Amazon and Apple right now. And thank you so much for coming on, and can't wait to see what you both do next.
All right, so that was the creative team behind Grace Point.
All right, yeah, check it out. Again, it is streaming on most platforms, but the ones they specified were on Apple TV and Amazon. Already out.
All right, so Ben, it is time to pay the bills. We have to thank our fine friends over at Arri. Arri, maker of all kinds of cool equipment, had a really good showing at the Oscars. Now, granted, they're not talking about when, Best Picture or Best Actor or whatnot comes up, that, who made the cameras or who made the technology or who serviced behind. When you read the credits and you see all the credits that go by, the hundreds, often sometimes thousands of individual credits that go by, quite often there are people who are being thanked there from Arri. And so Arri, actually, 5 out of the 10 Best Picture noms were shot on Arri cameras this year. And yeah, I know that. And 5 out of 10. I mean, there was five of them that didn't use Arri equipment, but 5 of them did. So like 50%, which is pretty darn good. And when we're talking about like the Best Picture winner, Anora, Arri camera shot on film. And then, of course, The Brutalist, winner for Best Cinematography, shot this division, but they also used Arri other film cameras to augment that. Yeah. So, those are huge key awards, especially on the technical side. And then Airy Rentals serviced 3 of the Best Picture nominees as well too. There is actually a blog post on the Airy website. We will put a link to that in the show notes over at Cam Noir, so people can go and read all about all the wins that Airy helped support during the year. But they had things to do with The Substance and Dune 2, and there's just tons and tons of information. Wicked, of course, Alice Brooks, all kinds of stuff is up there. 4 out of 5 nominated in the category of cinematography were shot on Airy, and 3 out of the 5 were serviced by Airy Rental. So it's like, look, it's like it goes on and on and on. I'm only like scrolling through about halfway of this here. Maria was captured by Airy Cam LTs by Ed Lockman. It's like there's tons and tons of stuff on here. Nosferatu, Airy Cam. So, really sort of the story that's not being talked about at the Oscars this year was film. And film is like, there's really only a couple of companies out there that do all the film stuff. So if it's not Panavision, it's Airy. So Airy is really, really cleaned up this year. They did incredibly well at the Oscars. So congratulations to Airy. Congratulations to all the nominees and winners. And, we'll definitely be watching to see what happens with this film thing. Not just a fad, not just hanging around.
I'll be interested to see how many movies next year are shot in VistaVision, now that I feel like it's really a thing.
Could be. Well, I mean, it's 35 millimeter turned on its side, so you can still get the film pretty easily and get a bigger image.
And now, short ends.
So Ben, it is our short end time of the show. It's when we talk about our obsession of the week. Could be anything. What is your obsession? What are you all about?
I want to follow up on a previous obsession, and then I'm going to talk about a new one. So I got a twofer here, but I'm going to be really, really brief about the first one. I brought up months ago a movie called From Darkness to Light, which was about the making of Jerry Lewis's never-released film, The Day the Clown Cried.
I remember we talked about this.
So I've cut the cord, so I don't have Turner Classic Movies anymore, so I didn't have any way to watch it. And I've been like searching around for how can I see this movie? I will buy it on Blu-ray. Like, is it streaming anywhere? Is it on VOD somewhere? Nowhere. So finally, I was complaining about it to a friend of mine who's also kind of obsessed with The Day the Clown Cried. And he's like, oh, I DVR'd it. You want to watch it? And he'd already seen it. So I watched it off of his DVR. And holy crap, that is an amazing documentary. And I feel like I've seen the movie now. They had so much footage. But that movie, that documentary is kind of like part heist film, because there was a guy in the Swedish lab where they were holding the film after it had been processed but not paid for, and they were going to throw it all away. And this guy knew what it was, and so in the dark of night, he transferred it to 1-inch tape back in the day and had the only copy of some of the footage. And, Jerry Lewis brought on an actual concentration camp. He was an officer at concentration camps who, in part was murdering people in an industrial fashion as a technical advisor on the film. The story is so much more wacky and disturbing in so many ways than I had imagined. And I always thought that it was like he'd taken a Holocaust story and made it into a Jerry Lewis, hardly working, the bellboy kind of horrible comedy and terrible taste. And it is quite the opposite. The Day the Clown Cried was a serious drama that he was trying to make. And it's like, okay, then why did you rename the character who was from a book? Why did you rename him Helmet Dork? There's so many things about it that make it sound, but it's nutso. Anyway, this is my plea. If the people who own the rights to this hear this, or anyone knows them, please release it on Blu-ray. I'll buy it. I want to watch this again. I think this needs to be out there. So that was the first part. That was a follow-up because I brought that up months and months ago when I first heard about From Darkness to Light. But the new one is something that's kind of a little bit closer to both of us, because we've been talking about it since it happened. And it's a documentary you can watch right now on Hulu. And I believe we're going to have the filmmakers on in the next few weeks. It's called Last Take, Rust and the Story of Helena. And it's about the shooting of Helena Hutchins on the set of Rust by Alec Baldwin. And I think, especially if we are going to have the filmmakers on, anyone who listens to this show should check it out. Anyone who wants to go into film or is in film should check this out. It's such I mean, it's a horrible, tragic story, obviously. Helena Hutchins, who is like the exact kind of person we love to have on our show, murdered, killed while filming a movie that was kind of a dream of hers to do a Western. She was very excited about it. Rust with Alec Baldwin. This was kind of the thing that was going to break her out. This is the movie we would have had her on the show for. And the footage that they show from the movie looks excellent. And the director, who also was shot but survived, seems like a relatively passionate person. But, you kind of get a rare glimpse into kind of the microcosmic family that you build when you make a movie. And then what happens when like a tragedy of this magnitude strikes it. And definitely, like, you and I have speculated based on news reports and stuff about who is at fault or who should be held responsible. And I feel like this documentary, it's not really a spoiler, like kind of lays it at the feet of the armorer and what she did that, was kind of unforgivable, which is like in her kit were live rounds. But there's also like some blame definitely laid at the feet of the producers and the first AD. And they have extensive interviews with basically everyone. They don't have a sit down interview with Alec Baldwin, but they have a lot of audio of him, which I assume was taken from other news sources or whatever. They don't have interviews with the armorer, but they do have interviews with the first AD and several crew members. And it's very, very telling. And I think it's for anyone in the film world, because we have all been at one point or another on a shoot, like we want to get X, and if we can get it if we just skirt safety a little bit. And we've all had that, devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. And for me, the angel on my shoulder is Neil Fredericks, our mutual friend who died in a plane crash because the filmmakers were doing something unsafe on a film he was shooting. And I always think, like if we don't have time to take 10 minutes to make this safe, then we don't do it. And in the case of this, it would have literally been the first AD pulling what he thought were dummy rounds out of a gun and shaking them to see if they'd rattle, which dummy rounds will and real bullets won't. And he didn't do it, and Alec Baldwin didn't do it, and the armorer did her job horrifically. And I think it's I don't know. I think it's kind of an important thing. It is better to not have the shot than it is to hurt somebody or damage something or whatever. And to me, this is the most extreme version of that, because it wasn't. It went beyond oops. It wasn't a clerical error. This is like a systemic problem from the top down on this film.
Yeah. So many productions, it's safety third, not safety first. And when you're messing around, like I see dummies on Instagram all the time, like the way that they're shooting. And I think to myself, holy crap, you only get to, skirt death so many times, but it's like when you've got budget and you've got people, and there are people whose jobs it are to be making sure that things are handled safely. At the end of the day, it's everyone's responsibility, but it's really difficult when you're in one of these, key leadership positions. That's actually not the person truly responsible, for you to speak up and to say something and say, no, we can't do this. And anytime there's a firearms are just, I mean, it's a whole thing.
Back to my rant about like, why are we using blanks on sets today anyway? They're really unnecessary. And if you're gonna use them, if like you have a reason, there's probably a reason to use them sometimes. If you got to do it, then you have to go to as the furthest lengths. And every armorer I've ever worked with, and I've worked with several, have been like nerdy about safety.
Yeah.
Like this woman is not indicative of what an armorer is like. And I think even she would like, they have footage of her right after the shooting, and you see that she's a broken person by what happened, because she understands the depth of it. Anyway, please, anyone listening to this, check it out. Let us know what you think. I think it's a phenomenal documentary, and it's on Hulu right now. So if you have Hulu, you can watch it today. Awesome. So on that happy note, Ilya, what's your short end this week?
Yeah, this is quite the episode. Yeah, but I'll. My short end this week is South by Southwest. You know me, I really like South by Southwest. It's been I would say for a lot of people, an incredible festival experience, especially if you've got a badge and you're going around and you're doing sort of like all the things. It's taken place over more than a week in Austin, Texas. And now actually they've also added it to Sydney, Australia. And it is coming up again in October in Sydney this year. But they've just announced, it just wrapped up in Austin, and they've just announced changes for 2026. Some of the changes are it's getting shorter and smaller, and it's not going to be staggered anymore. So the PMC Corporation, Penske Media, which of course owns Variety and Hollywood Reporter, they own 50% of South by Southwest now. And film is taking on, film was always sort of like, I won't say redheaded stepchild, but it was always sort of like a smaller, less important part of the festival. For 2026, it's getting further beefed up. Now they have the EDU and they have their business and they have the music. Of course, the music they're probably most famous for, but that's getting smaller. The music portion, the second weekend is being dropped. So the entire festival now is only a week and there's no more staggering. Everything is going on concurrently. The reason that they're giving for this is that the Austin Convention Center, which was where you would pick up your badges and where their festival headquarters was, is closing for the next 3 years for like refurbishment or some sort of upgrades. And so while that is happening, South by is not going to have the ability to use it. In response to shortening the festival, they've also lowered the prices. So for some of the badges, the pre-order prices are now half of what they used to be. And I think the EDU badge is like $495, which is significantly, I think it's the least expensive of all the badges. The badges give you various perks and access, and I couldn't possibly go through all of them on here. But if someone was interested in going to South by and knew that they were interested in going in advance and knowing that it's a shorter festival, if you pre-order the badges, I know they do get more expensive as you get closer to the event. So it may not necessarily be a bad time to like go to the festival, but the biggest problem I always had with South by, and I think most people had, is that it is impossible to do everything. So you need the schedule to know what is happening when, and so where you have to figure out where you're going to be. That is one of the most challenging things because you've got so much stuff all happening at once. And if music is always going to be colliding now with the other things, granted, a lot of music happens in the evening. Most of the other things don't have the late evening events, although film certainly does, and some of the others do as well on occasion. But getting through and navigating the waters of South by might even be more difficult, and it might attract more people. I've heard attendance has been down ever since the pandemic, so they have never kind of gotten back to their former glory. It'll be interesting to see what happens. The festival's not going away. Sydney is continuing. So yeah, I look forward to checking it out maybe in 2026, but I skipped it this year. I had way too much stuff going on. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
It's interesting to see that we're seeing seismic shifts in South by and Sundance right at the same time.
It's true. Yeah. Sundance, we've talked about a lot on the show already, but
and we can announce it here that Tribeca is moving to Branson, Missouri. Right?
Well, here's the thing, though. The whole industry seems to be in a bit of a moment. So things are changing. Things are happening. And, what the future brings will be anyone's guess right now. I've got my own crystal ball, but I'll have to go into that another time.
Okay, can't wait to hear that. That about wraps us up. Ilya, where can people find you online if they want to interact with you and hear your prognostications of the future of all entertainment?
Wow, good question. You can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com. Ben, where can people find you?
benrock.com. Hey, Ilya, who do we have to thank this week?
Hey, we got to thank our producer, Alana Cody, who is lining up all kinds of incredible stuff. And I think we can start talking about it. We got a really great live podcast that's about to happen at the BEA part of NAB coming up in just a couple
of
weeks.
We're going to be at NAB. Holy crap. Both right. You and I.
Both you and I will be there, and we're going to be interviewing a couple of fantastic ASC cinematographers in front of a live audience. So if you'd like to come and get your questions answered, I'm sure we will have all the details of that in our next episode.
Who else should we thank, Ilya?
Let's thank Kay Zalatracci, maker of the music that you hear on this. He is the composer. He is also you just told me he wants to hear from me. So God, he's got to be a guy with great taste. So, Kay Zelatraci, composer of all the music you've heard. Go to musicbykays.com to see what else that guy does. We also got to thank Charlie Nix. Charlie Nix, our new editor of the podcast. If there's weird jump cuts and, the sound is out of sync, Charlie's the person to blame. This will be his third episode.
The jump cutty effect, like, that's just kind of how people do the YouTube thing now anyway. So I've gotten used to it. When I'm editing myself, I can't help but cover jump cuts with B-roll, or at least a repositioning, a frame push in or something. But everyone's used to the jump cut look.
Yes, it has definitely become a style and an aesthetic. So I think that just about does it for this episode. Ben, do you want to take us out?
I would love to take us out. Thanks for tuning in.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.